welcome to episode number 164 of the LSR podcast. My name is Matt Brown, joined each and every week by the brightest minds in all of the gaming industry. With me, I have Dustin Gowker. I have Adam Candy. You can follow them on the Twitter machine for free, and you should, at Dustin Gowker, at Adam Candy, 2 E's, no Y. And if you hate yourself, you can follow me at Matt Brown M2. We do appreciate all your little subscribes and ratings and reviews and all the different things like that. And if you're watching us over on the video version on YouTube, hit that subscribe button and hello, welcome. Thanks for joining us here on the channel. We're going to talk about what's going on over in California with all those ads. If you're living over there, you are seeing a ton of those. What's going on in Maryland, Massachusetts. But Adam, let's kick things off here with some Sunday night football news.
Every week we have one of those stories that I say to you guys, I'm kind of surprised this didn't get more attention. And that's the one that we're talking about right now, with PointsBet stepping back, MGM stepping in as the odds presenter and sponsor for Sunday Night Football. And we can boil it down to something very simple. Who leaves the NFL? This doesn't make a lot of sense to me in terms of what's going on. PointsBet has said officially that it's scaling back on its national presence and that it's going to advertise more regionally. BetMGM obviously already in a place to step in with the NFL and gets now one of the most popular programs every single week in all of not just sports, but in all of live programming, period. So, this brings up a number of questions. And of course, we've talked about PointsBet ad nauseum, I'm sure, for some, in terms of, will people see this as an acquisition target? Will they see it as a company that, what is the future there? Well, this is not something that to me speaks very highly of the long-term potential for PointsBet, because to go back to the point I made earlier, who leaves the NFL, especially when you're trying to make a name for yourself in the U.S. sports betting market?
Yeah, I mean, Dustin, if we take a look at this, it's one of those deals where, we talk about island games just from a content perspective. We know that everybody is far more in tune with the island games being Thursday night football, Sunday night football, and Monday night football games where there's no competition. They're the only game in town. They're on national television, so everybody has access to them. And it is one of the places where if you are a PointsBet, you are guaranteed eyeballs, because it is one of the most viewed games, and it doesn't matter what the matchup is. It is one of the most viewed games of the week every single week.
Yeah, I guess this points to it's not effective, or PointsBet just doesn't see the cost. We've talked about PointsBet, about between 3 and 4%, I believe, of market share nationally. So is this not moving the needle for them? I guess that's a possibility. But yeah, this is something that you should think from a branding perspective. People were going gaga to the reverse of that. It's like people were going gaga when DraftKings is on Amazon, right? I saw 5 bazillion stories about that and people talking about it and getting buzz. So there's a little bit of a disconnect between that and this. And is BetMGM, as it's pushing into more relevancy and trying to, not just be a top 5 operator and push into DraftKings and FanDuel for that number 1, 2 position. It's weight on the scale there for sure.
And Adam, as we take a look here, just from a BetMGM perspective, right? We know they are one of the ones that still tons of advertising. We still see the Jamie Foxx commercials and whatnot. And so we know that there are, different initiatives here with them where they're going the celebrity route. They're not really going the over the top, trying to be funny type stuff. They're just doing the more like, hey, here's a celebrity, go bet type deal. But you now come in with this Sunday Night Football partnership, and you just start to wonder, okay, what does this mean for MGM? We had heard maybe all these books were going to start pulling back on spending. We thought that maybe this was like, oh, okay, we'll go into more retention than acquisition mode, whatever it might be. But it does make you wonder if maybe there was even a shift in philosophy, right?
It does to some degree, but I think it also speaks to what the Sunday Night Football opportunity is, Matt. It's what you mentioned already. Island NFL equals dollars one way or the other for someone. And if you're MGM and you have that opportunity, you have to step into that space no matter what you've decided your overall spending plan is. Keep in mind, for PointsBet, this is part of a larger deal they had with NBC, right? PointsBet and NBC have a big tie-up. you would think Sunday Night Football is about the most attractive piece of that tie-up for PointsBet, but now BetMGM comes in and takes that place. In terms of operators pulling back, BetMGM's kind of played the middle a little bit. Caesars has been the one that's been very loud about how they accomplished what they wanted to in New York, how they pulled back on national ad spend, whereas FanDuel has basically said, yum, yum, give me some. If you're going to back off, we're going to take those customers from you, and we will continue to push, and they'll continue to push in a different way, right? Talking about payout and ease of getting that payout and kind of talking to a more mature, sophisticated customer. So in the end, I think for BetMGM, it just presented too good an opportunity not to jump in.
Dustin, let's head over to California. And I actually just anecdotally got a taste of this because as I have the California feeds coming in for the different baseball games that I watch during the day, I actually started to see all of the California ads about sports betting and things like that. And so I didn't really even know what was happening over there until I got a taste of it for myself. But it looks like maybe we're going to see some of that backing off just a little bit over in California.
Yeah, this is dare I say, and Adam can correct me, I say this is probably a bad sign for the prospects of California's online sports betting in the short term. So what we're seeing is yes on Prop 27, which is the prop that would widely legalize online sports betting. In California, they are pulling back on their advertising push with just basically a month and a half left to go before the ballot is in front of California voters. So we're seeing they're going to pull back from major media markets, targeting LA still, and then not doing as much across California. So you can maybe read tea leaves and think they're giving up. Well, we've seen some polling for in California that made it look bad for Prop 27 as well. So good news, you don't see as many ads, but bad news, if you want online sports betting, might not be a good omen for California.
Adam, we look at the California stuff. I know you watch a lot of baseball as well. You've probably seen it on the various feeds and things like that. And it actually there was a ton of different commercials, certainly on all sides and things like that. And then, I stuff that you and I probably look for, like at the end of the commercial, seeing like paid for and who it was paid for by, and then you see all the sportsbooks listed and all the different things like that. So I'm sure you have actually kind of had a firsthand experience of what all was going over in California as well.
Well, the most interesting part for me, Matt, was doing a hit with the public radio station in LA this past week and talking to not only the host, but to some of the callers as well. I can't believe how many people didn't know this has anything to do with sports betting, because the Yes on 27 ads are all about homelessness and funding for that and mental health. And the No on 27 ads are a lot more about tribal sovereignty and about out-of-state companies coming in and making money off Californians. And there were people who called into that show and said, until your program today, I had no idea this had anything to do with sports betting. And you know what? That is clearly a deliberate strategy on the parts of the Yes on 27 folks, the sportsbooks who are trying to get online sports betting passed. Now, this news that came out, first reported the San Francisco Chronicle, that they're going to pull back outside of LA. You can look at it a number of ways from a political perspective. One is that they're kind of saturated at this point. Like, they spent a lot of money throughout August and September to get awareness of this issue up to where they wanted it. Now, you also could look at it and say they're running short on money, but that doesn't seem to be the case, right? Like what we've seen, Matt Waters had a story the other day that said we're over $400 million on both sides for funding, the most expensive statewide prop in state history for California and beyond, actually. And so I look at it and say to myself, okay, I can buy a little bit of the fact that you're redistributing your spend, but I'll tell you from the perspective of someone having been in politics, right before early vote starts is not really the time to be pulling back on your TV spend, because you want to be present with people right before they go out and begin their early voting. So maybe there is more coming here. Maybe it's not going to be a full pullback. Maybe they're just looking at this time of year and saying, okay, we're going to take 3-4 weeks off here and really ramp back up closer to the election. But referencing the polling Dustin talked about, right now it's kind of feeling like it's going to be no on both in terms of what we've heard and seen from polling and anecdotal.
Yeah, and to follow up, like Matt's reporting, like Adam said, like so they're going to do more into digital advertising, direct mail. Again, I agree. I mean, Adam and I have both been in politics or studied politics, at least on my side. And yeah, like giving the share a voice on TV to no on 27 feels like, yeah, like maybe you've been saturated, but you're now just ceding voice to that. So it's a fraught with peril. Maybe pivoting will change their fate, but. And yeah, I mean, if direct mail is getting a totally different audience than the people who watch sports and and if it's not really focused on online sports betting, then maybe that makes sense. I will say I've gotten more direct mail, I think, in recent days on politics than I have in the past for whatever reason, even in a world that's more and more digital. So we'll see. But yeah, the people who are behind these propositions and the lobby and trying to get these passed, they make a lot of money to do that. So they're on the hook for the decisions here in terms of them being the right ones to get their the yes or no on both 26 and 27 through.
Adam, we were kind of looking at Maryland, right? And we were trying to figure out, what's it looking like? Is it looking good? Is it looking bad? Like, how are things happening over there in Maryland? Everybody, and I say this, all of the two people that I know that live there are really wondering what's going on over in Maryland. So what are we looking at here? Are things actually looking up?
I want to say yes. And the top regulator in Maryland says yes. And yet I've watched Maryland for 2 years now. And so I'm hesitant to say yes, because it has been such a struggle to get any progress in Maryland. So basically, let's sum it up with this. Maryland's top regulator told Pat Evans from Legal Sports Report that he believes sports betting will launch before the end of the year for legal mobile operations. He believes December is almost a certainty, that November is a possibility. Now, that being said, this is the same state that took 18 months on a disparity study for minority and women-owned businesses and said, how do we do a better job of making sure that these businesses are included? And then basically sent a giant shrug emoji back to the legislature and said, I don't know if we're going to be able to do that. So maybe you should just go ahead with this thing. So here we are. The committee met today and said that the timeline that they put out there of later this year is still a distinct possibility. So Maryland went from maybe spring 2023 to probably during this NFL season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. With the also you shrugging if you're watching on video, the probably. Dustin, what's about Massachusetts?
Yeah, kind of the reverse in Massachusetts, right? We're seeing no good news in terms of when we're going to see a launch there. We're getting held up right now by some regulatory issues in terms of how this is going to roll out. So, Massachusetts, which a lot of people, not named us, we're handicapping to move really quickly, possibly into legal sports betting. Licensing language is really holding this up in terms of there's the legislature passed something that allowed for temporary licenses to take place in Massachusetts ahead of full licensure, but the way things stand, that almost anybody could get that. But then the regulators are saying we could have to come back and turn you off based on there's not enough full licenses for everyone to go. So they're working on possibly a legislative fix, the regulator working with the legislature to figure this out, but the regulators are often beholden to this is what the law says, and they don't have wiggle room. So they're trying to figure out what the right thing is to do. Also points to the fact that writing legislation is not easy all the time, especially when you're doing gambling, and the fact that we haven't seen more problems possibly with as we've rolled out gambling legislation across the country. There's that. So I think we expected by this time in September to at least know when a launch date was, but as we sit here, we don't know a whole lot about exactly when Massachusetts is going to launch until this issue gets freed up to let people know what's going on with both temporary and full licenses in Massachusetts.
Adam, I want to take things home here, get both of y'all's opinion on something. And this is, I'm going off script here, guys. So forgive me for hitting them with something that they haven't had a chance to prepare for yet. But I'm very interested, it'll be a delay for sure, but I'm very interested in September 2022 numbers, because Adam, here we go with several states getting their first full taste of being able to bet from the very beginning of college football season, the very beginning of NFL season as well. And then, as we know, now we are heading into week 3. things could be different in the NFL. We are only heading into week 4 in college football, so things could be different. However, through the first few weeks of the season, a ton of upsets and a ton of unders on the NFL side of things as well. And one thing we know is Joe Public likes to bet favorites and Joe Public likes to bet overs. And so far that has not been happening in the NFL, and even in college football, we've had some really huge major upsets in the first few weeks of the season. And I am very interested as to what kind of numbers we might see come out of September 22, because if anything, as long as there isn't something wackadoodle here in week 3 of the NFL, I think we are going to see some pretty monster numbers come out for this month.
So Matt, I think you probably know quite well that we're here at week 3 and all spreads are within 7 points, because look what's happened the first 2 weeks with some of the craziness that's gone on in the National Football League. And for those of you out there on the interwebs who like to scream at us about handle reporting versus revenue reporting, well, guess what? You're going to get some fun revenue reporting numbers this month, because this one's going to be much more about hold than it is about handle. Like, we'll look at the handle numbers, but the hold numbers could be nuts. I mean, there was one sportsbook that said they had one game, I believe it was Cowboys-Bengals, that the swing on Cowboys-Bengals going to the Cowboys was 8 figures for them. Mm-hmm. 8, not 7 figures, 8 figures for them on the Cowboys pulling the upset on the Cincinnati Bengals. And so, Matt, I appreciate the fact that you're going off script, because I actually was going to go off script with a question for you, since you didn't get to weigh in last week on Pinnacle getting licensed up in Ontario. And I know that your history with sports betting goes deep enough to know the significance of an offshore the size of Pinnacle trying to make its way into the North American regulated market.
Yeah, the interesting thing for me is just, we'll find out right real quick whether that model transfers over to, the casual sports bettor. Do they care? Do people care? Right? Like that's the thing, is we've seen, I think, with how popular the sports books are here in the States, anecdotally for me, with my friends that have gotten the new taste of being able to sports bet in Louisiana and all that stuff like that. I mean, the best number, the best price, the best, all the different things that matter to the 1%. And I might even say less than the 1%, the 0.5% of people who really take this super, super, super seriously. And that matters to them and matters to their bottom line. I wonder if people care. And I would like to think that as we get more sophisticated and the market matures, that people will care about things like that. I just think early on, probably not. I think honestly, probably not, when it all comes down to it.
Yeah, that thought that that would be something that would be very curious to talk to someone who, I mean, you do a good job of understanding both the pro side and the public side with all of this. And I think there's going to be a decent little divide in there, much the way there is when we talk about sport trade launching in New Jersey, and the fact that now we have a legal exchange in the US. And I think that's going to be another big divide as well.
Yeah, I mean, Dustin, and from the exchange standpoint, for me, I mean, listen, if there was liquidity, if there was, it's the same thing we talk about with online poker, right? Like, online poker is never really going to thrive here until, we have 20 states up and going and they all have compacts. And so the same deal with the trade. I think there is a potential for that to work, certainly. I mean, Matchbook over in the UK is actually a fairly popular site that a lot of people that I know anecdotally use, for sure. But without the liquidity to come in and make it a viable marketplace, I just don't know how. I don't know the path to success, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack, and it still goes to early days. People are still just learning about like how to bet at a sportsbook, like introducing another model on top of that. Maybe that, these exchanges, maybe it caters more to or talks or speaks to more to a day trader who understands this. But you're still having to speak the sports betting parlance. There's a lot to unpack, and on top of that, yes, ring fence for liquidity. That's rough. How, like, can that be overcome? Right now, we're just in one market for these new exchange products. But yeah, this is all interesting. And the numbers, I'll go back to the numbers. Your initial question. It'll be interesting to see, like, does this move the needle? We've seen a lot of ink spilled about props are the way forward, but we also see these large decisions on these spreads. So there's something a little bit discordant there in terms of that. Which one comes out? I saw ESPN published There are about a bazillion people betting on Aaron Judge props right now with everything, with all everything going on around him. I'll also throw in there, DraftKings has been running these up 10, up 7 promos, right? And when you're bet on the money line, guess what? There's been a lot of games where they had to pay out both sides. That's maybe not great. I mean, they got a lot of they got a lot of people betting, so they acquired a lot of customers around this, but it's going to show up in the revenue here as well, not just the handle.
Adam, just to put a bow on that as well. I mean, listen, with the same game parlay stuff, I mean, typically people are betting these same game parlays the same way that they bet these, 4 and 5 leg other parlays and stuff. And they're not really necessarily trying to correlate these things and whatever. And so with upsets and things kind of going awry and all these unders hitting, because of course in these same game parlays, it's over this, over that, over this, over that. I imagine the same game parlay market, as well as we continue to just talk about from a revenue standpoint, at least in these first couple of weeks, has been absolutely amazing for these sports books. Because again, with all the unders hitting, with all the offenses outside of Miami not really clicking and stuff, it's got to be one of those deals where they have just been eating those things up as well.
Cream, get the money, dollar bill, y'all, on same game parlays without question. And look, we know that historical hold in Nevada, we've used this number over and over again, 5.4%, right? That's about an average hold in Nevada. And we've seen that actually grow in some places over time. Look at New York, is at about 7.5% in its short lifetime so far. So then we look at the fact that most parlays end up in double digits every month in terms of the hold. You get a month like this when it comes to these multi-leg parlays in the NFL, we could be talking about 20, 30% hold just on those particular parlays if we would get that number broken out. So those operators that are trying to build those in and copy what FanDuel started are probably doing pretty well.
Yeah, it's going to be super, super interesting. I can't wait till the numbers come out. We're going to certainly talk about September 2022, so long as things don't get completely wacky this weekend in the NFL. Guys, you can follow Adam and Dustin on the Twitter machine at Adam Candy, 2 E's, no Y, at Dustin Galker. And of course, subscribe, rate, review, Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, Google, all the places that you get your podcast. And of course, if you're watching us on YouTube, we do appreciate it. And also hit that subscribe button. Certainly going to be doing more with the channel as well. For Adam, for Dustin, I'm Matt. Talk to you guys next week.